Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding universities. Thanks for taking the time to be here. This is going to be a productive webinar. Certainly, I know if I had understood some of these things before starting graduate school, I would have hit the ground running a little bit faster. So we hope that you have that experience as well. My name is William Whittles. I am the Assistant Dean of Academic Affairs at the Graduate School at Brown University. In my capacity, I am a liaison to programs as they are revising their requirements. I spearhead a number of initiatives as well across the university. It's my pleasure to be joined by four wonderful panelists, and it is even more so my pleasure to get to introduce them. So we are joined by Dr. Candace Repish, who is the Assistant Vice Provost and Director of Caltech's Student Faculty Programs Office. In that capacity, she oversees undergraduate research programs, including the Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship and various diversity-focused graduate recruitment efforts. We are also joined by Dr. Celina Chatman Nelson, who is the Senior Associate Dean for Diversity and Professional Development in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences at Columbia University. She oversees graduate student professional development in areas such as career preparation and planning, academic writing support, and applying to fellowships, as well as initiatives related to graduate diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm pleased also to be joined by Dr. Joseph Lewis, who is the Associate Dean for Access, Diversity, and Inclusion at Princeton University's Graduate School. He brings over 15 years of experience in higher education to the Princeton Graduate School, where he works on college-wide initiatives that promote diversity and inclusive excellence across a variety of positions and in a variety of capacities. Last, I'm joined by John Ivey, who is the IDEAL Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Learner Research Program Coordinator for undergraduate research training programs and recruitment at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. John focuses on SR-EIP and recruitment for the different programs under the school's umbrella. I'm very pleased to be joined by you all. The way we're going to approach this is first, I'm going to introduce just some of the big concepts, or rather some of the, hopefully demystify some of the big terms and titles that are sort of common to universities. And then we're going to hand over sort of a Q&A. So we've discussed a couple of different questions that we want to make sure we address. And then, of course, we've gotten all of your excellent questions. So we want to get to those very quickly. So something that, you know, I still have difficulty sometimes explaining to, for example, my family, is what the difference between a president and a provost is, who the trustees are and exactly what they do, what my title, assistant dean, means, and how that's different from the people who sort of run graduate programs day to day. So I'm going to start at the top with the trustees. Sometimes they might be called regents or a corporation member. Corporation member actually comes from the 18th century usage. It doesn't have anything to do with, you know, corporations as we understand them today. This is a group of people who are unpaid, sometimes are graduates of the university themselves. Occasionally there's a student member as well. They are the ultimate decision makers on all of the major decisions that have to be made. They ultimately have to sign off on the budget that the university or college will draw up for the coming year. They have to sign off on what the tuition rate is set at. They have to approve strategic initiatives that the university may undertake. If a university decides to start offering a new degree, for example, let's say they wanted to create a business school and start offering an MBA, the trustees would have to approve that. So they, in a word, make, not in a word, to sum up, they make all legal and fiduciary, i.e. financial decisions for the university. They may delegate some of that authority from time to time, but ultimately it is their responsibility to safeguard the school's mission, its reputation, and its resources. And that may include reshaping the mission when necessary, and of course, minimizing risks of conflict. They will help to formulate the strategic plan. And then, perhaps most importantly, they're the president's boss. So they're the folks who are going to hold the president accountable, or chancellor, that may be another title, accountable for executing the plans that have been drawn up for the university, both in the coming year, as well as over the tenure of the president's time in office. So that brings me to the president themselves. It's often joked that they just are fundraisers. That is a major part of their role. They're really the face of the university. They're a person who can represent the university or college as a whole, whether they are asking for funds, whether they are liaising with government, whether they are presiding over all of the major ceremonies. It's the president's responsibility to sort of be that face, be that point person. But in addition to that, at a strategic level, not a day-to-day level, they're really responsible for making sure that what the university intends to do, what all of the stakeholders who have worked on a process of developing a plan of deciding what the university will be doing, the president's responsible for making sure that that happens, and responding to the kinds of emergencies that may conflict with the university's teaching, research, and learning mission. In that capacity, they are helped by somebody whose title is typically the provost. So the provost is generally the second highest ranking officer in any college or university. And they're what we often call the chief academic officer. So they're really responsible for overseeing the research, learning, and teaching efforts of the university. Now you might ask, isn't that everything that a university does? Not really. Universities and colleges are a lot like small cities, right? There are communities that get developed. People live here. We have police departments. We have departments that are responsible for maintaining all of the buildings and the roads and the grounds. We have accountants. We've got lawyers. So the provost really focuses on the academic pieces. And then there are often, they might be called a vice president or an executive vice president, who oversees a lot of those efforts that really go into supporting and making sure that that research, teaching, and learning mission can happen. If you go to a university's website that has public information about what it's, how many employees of different kinds that it has, you're likely to see that by far and away, the largest sort of single bucket of employees is IT. We need to have sophisticated information technology systems, and that requires a lot of people to manage that. And so generally the provost won't be directly involved in a lot of those day-to-day functions. That'll be somebody else who also sits in the president's cabinet. The provosts, in their capacity as the chief academic officer, will oversee the activities of, for example, the following three units. The Dean of the Faculty's Office, the Graduate School, or it might be called the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, as well as the college, right? So what are those units, and what are the people who lead them? What is the Dean of the Faculty? So the Dean of the Faculty's Office is the office that is primarily responsible for hiring faculty members, determining which departments get to hire new faculty members when, running the accreditation process for your university, or at least assisting with it. They also may be the decision maker on how many graduate students a given PhD program, for example, can recruit. That decision may also sit with the graduate school. But really, this is the person who is in charge of the faculty and what they're doing and how they will manage their programs. The college, right? We often get confused between the difference between a college and a university. Generally, a university is made up of 2 or more colleges or schools. So that's when they're all sort of assembled together. In the American system, if you are at a university and you have these different colleges and schools, usually the college is the one that serves undergraduates, folks pursuing their bachelor's degrees. And the dean of the college, sometimes maybe called the dean of students, is the person who is primarily responsible for overseeing that undergraduate experience. They'll collaborate with, there may be an office of student life that helps to manage events and things like that, and they may collaborate with them. And you can look at the dean of the graduate school in a somewhat analogous role. A dean of a graduate school is generally responsible for the graduate student experience and primarily academic experiences, as opposed to, say, their sort of social experience. So those 3 officers, and there are often more, particularly if your university has more schools. For example, University of Pennsylvania has a medical school, so there's a dean of the medical school. If your university has a business school, there's going to be a dean of that school. Brown University has a school of public health. We have a dean of that school. A dean is generally somebody who heads up a sort of large unit within the university. Now, the people who you will, in terms of administrators, who you will interact with pretty regularly as a graduate student, also happen to be faculty members. This is the chair of your department and the director of graduate studies of your program. Both of these positions typically rotate among the faculty of a given department. So faculty member Smith will do a term as the chair, and then maybe faculty member Andrews will take over, and faculty member Jones will become the director of graduate studies. Generally, the chair represents the department in a lot of decision-making capacities. And the director of graduate studies is really responsible for making a lot of the decisions around things like graduate student TA assignments, and just making sure that certain things happen as far as your graduate program is concerned. This could be if you needed to change out a required course, say for a master's or a PhD, and you think something's a better fit. It's probably the director of graduate studies who has to sign off on that. If you're applying for internal funding within your university, generally you need, in addition to the endorsement of your advisor, the endorsement of your director of graduate studies. So they're really the person who sort of, you can almost think of them as the principal of your PhD program, that director of graduate studies. The chair has a more faculty-facing role. They'll be assigning classes and things like that. And then I think probably the most important person in some ways to your academic experience will be the administrator for your program. This is the person who makes sure that all of your forms get submitted. When you've got a question and you just don't know how to get something done, this is the first person you go to. I still remember the name of the department administrator who I worked with when I was in graduate school. Her name was Fonda Anthony, and she saved my academic life on a number of occasions. So when you start your graduate program, 1, rely on these folks. 2, be very nice to them. They have a lot on their plates and they are incredible resources. So that's really a quick thumbnail of some of the big offices at a university and who heads them. At this point, I want to switch over to some of the questions that we've received for our panelists. And I guess I'll pitch the question and we'll just sort of go for each panelist in turn. And I think the first question is, well, what is the role of the graduate school's administration for graduate students who are under a certain program in a specific department? Wouldn't they go to their department's administration? Who should the student go to first? And Celina, I'm going to ask you to lead off.
Thanks, Will. So the role of the graduate school I had that written down in this prepared remarks. Let me just see where I put that. Columbia is interesting because, so as Will has already noted, universities typically make up several or comprise several different schools and colleges. At Columbia, that number is 18. So there are 2 undergraduate serving colleges, or 3 actually, and then the rest are graduate serving. So that would include, some of you are probably interested in applying to law school or medical school or an MD, PhD, or maybe an MFA in fiction writing or something else. And so those are programs that would not be in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, but they're in one of the other 15 graduate serving schools. So the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, I think what also makes it interesting here is that the dean of our school is also the executive vice president for graduate education across the university. So he serves a role that is just for the graduate school, and then a role that is for the entire university as regards graduate education. And also the graduate school here at Columbia confers all PhD degrees. So that means that we house the dissertation office. So as many of you may or may not know yet, the dissertation is kind of that culminating product that you have to complete and turn into the university. So it's a whole process. It can take several years. It typically does take at least 1, 2, sometimes 7 years to complete the actual research that goes into it. And then you have to write it up. And so when you write it up and you submit that to your department, to your committee, et cetera, it has to go through the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences here at Columbia through the dissertation office. And they have to sign off on it and make sure that, you've dotted all your I's, crossed all your T's with regard to it. And also that the people who you said were going to be on your committee actually served on your committee and they sign off on it, et cetera. So what happens here at Columbia is that a lot of students believe that they are GSAS students because that degree is conferred by GSAS in the end. And so because we don't administer programs, so a PhD program that's in engineering, for example, we don't set the policies around the degree requirements for that. These are not programs that we can advise on. So I'm not sure how clear that is, but I guess to get to the crux of the question, the graduate school really is the place where the policies for degree program requirement structures are actually put in place. So the departments have to follow those policies in order to create their degree programs and facilitate their students' progress through those program requirements. The school also sets policies for academic progress, for stipends, for example, for internal fellowships. So all of our PhD programs are fully funded for 6 years. So that means your tuition is covered, as well as a stipend for living expenses. The graduate school also sets policies, monitors eligibility, et cetera, for housing access, because we have graduate student housing here. And so whenever you have questions about that, it is the graduate school administration that you would come to. We have our own financial aid office, so you wouldn't go to financial aid at the college to find out about loans and fellowships. You would come to the graduate school financial aid office. Same for, so I oversee the diversity office and the career development office in our writing studio. And so it would, I think, serve you best to get to know the administration of your, or at least the administrative structure. So what are the offices and resources that are available within the graduate school? Because that's going to differ by institution. and by school within an institution. So whichever school you're in, learn what that administrative structure is, what resources they provide. And I think you're not always going to remember because they don't always apply at all times throughout your career. So when you're entering graduate student, some things will be more relevant then, but other things won't be relevant until you're at the dissertation stage. So I would say revisit it every now and then to know what's available. But I think primarily I would go back to Will's point about getting to know your department administrator, because that person is typically going to have the broadest knowledge of the institution, of the department, of the graduate school, and the relationships between those things to be able to at least direct you to the right place if they're not the person who has the answer for you. So that's where I would start. And I think yeah, I think I'll stop there. So I feel like I've been talking for a while. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Chatman Nelson. Dr. Repish, if I could call on you to answer this same question. What's the role of the graduate school's administration for graduate students who are under a specific program?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. I think Celina already said so many good things. Caltech is a little bit different than the other schools represented on this panel in that we are a very small place. So things look a little bit different than they do at a major, large institution. But some of the same structure is in place, right? And so as a graduate student, your main source of instruction and guidance and advising happens at the college level. We happen to call these things divisions at Caltech. We have 6 academic divisions, but really it's the same thing as having a college. Within those divisions, there are programs. So if we want to take a look at our chemistry and chemical engineering division, within that, you could major in chemistry, you can major in chemical engineering. So those would be what we also call options instead of majors or programs. We have language that is unique to our school, and I think it's very different than most other universities. And really, the faculty who leads that option or that program for the graduate students, we call them graduate option representatives, are really the key person who supports the graduate students within that major or option. And they are the people that you can go to and find out what is expected of you, what the timeline looks like, any questions about what the process looks like from time you enter to the time you graduate. But beyond that, the person who's really going to be super helpful to you is your advisor, right? They're going to be the person who is really guiding you and supporting you and mentoring you throughout your entire time. I would also say that in addition to the faculty in these options or majors, we have staff, which we call option administrators, and they are the staff that support the faculty and the students in getting everything done. And quite frankly, those people should be your best friends when you're in graduate school because they know how to get things done. They know who you can go to ask questions and get support. They know where the money is usually. So, making sure that you're connected to the administrators, not just the faculty within your academic department, is really important. So there's that structure within the academic side of the house. Here at Caltech, our Dean of Graduate Studies actually lives within our Student Affairs department. And they provide a lot of support for students academically. Say you're having a challenge within your own department and you don't feel comfortable and or safe speaking to people within the department, you would go to the Dean of Graduate Studies. If you're having personal issues, health issues, mental health issues, You know, you're thinking about needing a medical leave or going out on family bonding leave, whatever those kinds of things are. Those are the things you would go to our Dean of Graduate Studies for. And they help sort of manage the process between, you know, the administration and what's happening within your academic unit. So I think that those for graduate students are the main places where you'd want to go for that support.
So we have a great question that came in from one of our students. What are some tips for transitioning from a smaller local college in undergrad to a much larger university or graduate school? I'm going to this question because I was inspired by Dr. Repish's noting that, you know, even universities really vary greatly in size. So Dr. Lewis, can I ask you to respond to this question? What are some tips for transitioning from a smaller local college in undergrad to a much larger university or graduate school?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question, Will. Thank you so much for all of the great feedback that the panelists have offered. I'll answer that question by sort of giving an overview of sort of the graduate school here at Princeton, and then also, you know, thinking about, you know, going from that smaller institution to a larger institution. I do have to say that in terms of graduate schools, Princeton is more of a smaller institution. Our enrollment is about 3,300 students. We do not have any professional schools. So our schools are, you know, we have 4 divisions. The Division of Humanities, Division of Social Sciences, Division of Natural Sciences, and the Division of Engineering. And so one of the things that I would always, you know, some tips in terms of going from a small university to more of a bigger university is thinking about some of the resources that you took advantage of at your university, finding those resources at the larger institution. Where do you find the diversity office? Where do you find the sort of the office, you know, that is for professional development? Is that in the program or in the actual program to where you're applying, or is that in the larger graduate school? At Princeton, the graduate school is centralized. So our everything sort of happens within the larger graduate school. And we support all 45 of our programs. So we have 18 master's programs, 45 PhDs, and 33 interdisciplinary programs. And all of those programs sort of flow through the graduate school. And so when we're thinking about admissions, when we're thinking about policy, when we're thinking about you know, all of those sort of the processes that happen in graduate school and graduate support, it's sort of housed in the graduate school, and then every department within the divisions have their policies that are sort of unique to their divisions. And so when we're thinking about sort of the leadership structure and sort of how you might find those resources and how we sort of could help at Princeton, we have the dean of the graduate school, and the dean of the graduate school reports to the provost. And so under the dean, we have within the graduate school, we have departments, and we have our academic affairs department. And the academic affairs, you know, sets the policies for, you know, the academic progress, the dissertation, DCE status, students that need to take leave. And then the academic affairs department is split by divisions. So you also have the assistant deans for humanity and social sciences, and then the assistant dean for natural sciences and engineering. We also have our student affairs team. The student affairs is led by the associate dean of student affairs. And let me back up. The academic affairs is led by the deputy dean of the graduate school. So you have the dean, the deputy dean, academic affairs assistant deans, and then we get into student affairs deans. Now, the student affairs deans are going to, two separate assistant deans who are separated mostly by their specialization. So when we're thinking about things like mental health services or crisis response, student behavior policies, housing, food, all of the things that are connected to a student's experience goes through the student affairs team. So this is another sort of way of, in terms of going from a smaller college to a larger college, is getting a sense of what does the student support student affairs team look like? Again, is that student affairs office housed in the department, or is it housed in the larger graduate school? Here at Princeton, it's in the graduate school. And then our professional development team, which is our grad futures team, has a similar structure in the sense that we have the associate dean who runs the larger program, and then the two assistant deans, again, split by the humanities and social sciences and the natural sciences and engineering. And then we have the dean of finance. This is everything, related to the fellowships, tuition. At Princeton, you have free tuition as a PhD student for 5 years. And so anything connected to the financial progress of a student is the finance, the dean of finance. And then my team, the access, diversity, and inclusion team, I like to think about us as the heart of the graduate school, because we support students around financial affairs issues, around student affairs issues, and also around academic affairs issue. And we also have a similar structure. So me as the associate dean, and then our two assistant deans, one in the social sciences and humanities, the other in the natural sciences and engineering. So at Princeton, we have, if there is sort of a diversity program or programs that are focused in diversity, depending on the department, there might be multiple layers, right? So in one sense, there might be in a particular program, they might have diversity initiatives, diversity events, programs that are there to support the students, and we're there as that added layer from the graduate school level. So you have that support system sort of built in the actual departments, and then also in the larger institutional sort of in the actual dean of the graduate school. So when you're going from, that smaller institution to a larger institution, it's beneficial for you to get a sense of what you or the type of support that you already get, where those offices are in your current institution, and how does that map on to the institution to where you're applying. And this can happen in a variety of ways in terms of researching the websites, getting a sense of the staff in the graduate school and what they do, along with what happens in the actual departments. Does the department have a graduate program administrator? If so, reach out to them. At Princeton, all 45 of our PhD degrees have a graduate program administrator. So it's really good to get a sense of, or to connect with that graduate program administrator within that department so that you can find out what resources are offered from that department. So see what happens in terms of the institution that you're at to give yourself a reference point. And how does that map on to the institution that you are applying? And keep in mind, when you're applying to multiple institutions, that multiple institutions have different structures. So that's also going to determine who you reach out to, how you reach out, how you frame that, depending on the thing that you're trying to achieve, whether that be connecting to a community, trying to meet other grad students in that area, or also, applying for research, summer research experiences. So get a sense of what's going on, or the resources that you use in your current institution, and get a sense of what are the differences and similarities that are happening at the institution to where you're applying.
Mr. Ivey, if I could ask you to answer the same question, what would you advise somebody going from a small college to a place like the University of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. I'll kind of attempt to blend the answers that my colleagues on the panel have given together here, in that it's really important, like Dr. Lewis said, to identify what you've already been doing and what translates to where you're going to. But I would really advise like finding that trusted administrator, trusted mentor, somebody that you can just ask your embarrassing questions to, somebody that's willing to just be there for you in a mentorship type of way and explain your problems to them. I had a student come to me with some issues that they were facing, like getting around University City, which is the area around the UPenn here. And they just couldn't figure out parking and this or that. And just with a little bit of knowledge of the area, I was able to tell them, hey, you can actually park at a regional rail station for free and ride the rail in using the benefit that you get from being a Penn student. So I think going to these trusted people that you have in your network and just explaining your problems to them. Like, you don't know what you don't know until you find it out. And that's really true for everyone anywhere that they go. So I would encourage you all to find that trusted person, whether it's an elder student in your program, your faculty, PI mentor, someone in your lab, or an administrator for your program who you can just go to with these sort of questions or issues that might not be super pressing for you, but would make your life a whole lot better. I think those are the things that are afforded at a larger university that sometimes smaller schools don't have dedicated staff for it. And the problem with going from a small school where you know everybody to a large school where it's kind of overwhelming sometimes is that you don't know what all the resources are that's out there. So like my other colleagues have been saying, like, you need to research who these staff members are, who the faculty members are. And oftentimes you're going to see faculty PIs who are directors of a certain program or recruitment initiative. For example, I report to an assistant dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the School of Medicine, which is also subset within biomedical graduate studies. So it's all going to be different everywhere you go. There's going to be layers to it, but I would encourage you to be able to get personal with somebody to be able to address your specific needs.
So we just had a question come in, and it's actually the same question I was going to ask next, but I see that Dr. Repish has raised her hand. So go ahead.
There's so much great suggestions and information being shared. One of the things that I think we've strayed away from, which is a great resource for incoming graduate students, is the catalog. You all come in under a catalog, and in that catalog, it really does talk about the structure of your university, and it talks about the requirements and the people in each of the programs. I mean, our catalog is 900 pages, and I'm sure the bigger schools it's even bigger, so you don't have to read about all of the programs that you're not in, but there's a lot of information that's really interesting there. So just when you need some bedside reading over the course of the summer or your first term in graduate school, read about your specific option, because you'll probably learn a lot that maybe isn't told to you upon entering.
So the question is, how do you make those relationships? And I'm going to throw this question to Dr. Chatman Nelson. What advice would you give? Like, what would be your one weird trick for building relationships with administrators?
A weird trick, I don't know. I do think, so I think all of us have already noted somewhere, and therefore probably would agree that, I mean, it's perfectly fine to cold email a faculty member. But I think that when you do that, you have to have some idea of what outcome you seek out of that connection, that interaction. And then be sure to frame your email with that in mind. So it shouldn't just be, first of all, it shouldn't be, hey. So we're seeing a lot of that. So I think, take into consideration that these are people who have worked very hard for a very long time to establish themselves as leaders and experts in the academic field of research where their work is focused. And so they have earned the title of professor or doctor or whatever it is that they go by within your particular institutions. That can vary. But I would say just err on the side of being too formal rather than too informal. And they will let you know if it's okay to address them by first name or anything else that they go by. So I would start there. And I would say that, you know, in that email interaction, let them know, you know, that that you've read some of their work, or you went to a presentation that they did somewhere, or, you know, you heard about their research or a program, an academic program or research program that they oversee, and that you're very interested in and you'd like to learn more about it. And then I think you ask if they would be willing to meet. Could you come to their office hours to speak to them more about that? And again, just have a specific outcome in mind. And I think this is for any kind of networking activity. So this could apply to administrators or advanced students in your, you know, in your department or whomever. I think just know what outcome you seek out of that interaction and tailor your remarks to that. And so if the next step that you want is to have a meeting to discuss some idea further, then I think you say that explicitly in the text of the email. So, you know, is there a time when I can come by and speak with you for maybe about 20 minutes about this particular thing? So that would be where I would start. Thanks, Will.
Dr. Repish, if you were to be, you know, you're in your first year of a graduate program and you just arrived, what would you do to start building those relationships?
Yeah, in many cases, those relationships are going to actually start during the application or acceptance process. In many cases, you'll be doing visitations at schools, and during those visitations, you'll get a chance to identify some faculty that you want to meet with and understand more about their research. And so during those visits, figuring out what you want to know about the research happening in that program and who's doing it, and can you get in front of them during those visits to learn more about what they're doing and express interest in perhaps being a graduate student with them. When you get to a program, some of the programs will have rotations, and this will give you a chance to spend time in a variety of faculty research groups or laboratories to try them out and see if that's a good fit for you. And then you can make a decision about where you know, which lab you want to sort of go to and who you want your advisor to be. So there might be some built-in opportunities for you to start those relationships. But following up on what Dr. Chatman Nelson said, you know, if you ask a faculty member, you know, can I get coffee with you and learn a little bit more about the research you are doing on X, Y, and Z. The faculty usually like to talk about themselves and they like to talk about their research. And so they're usually, and they like coffee. So they're pretty interested in having those conversations. I will also say, you know, see if you can attend a group meeting of theirs, you know, to learn a little bit more about what is happening in their research group. If they're giving seminars or talks, make sure you go to them, or if you've been to them, reference them. You know, faculty, like the rest of us, don't answer or read every email that comes into their inbox in a timely manner. So if you know that you really want to get in front of somebody, you may need to go knock on their door and introduce yourself. And I know that that could be hard or intimidating for some, or introduce yourself to, again, their administrative assistant and see if you can't get on their schedule for a 15-minute meet and greet. So you sort of, I guess the bottom line is you have to be a bit of your own advocate around getting in front of the people you want to get in front of. But at the end of the day, the faculty want to meet you as well. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have an interest in them.
We got a very important question from a student. Dr. Lewis, I'm going to send it to you. How do administrators evaluate the success of their policies and initiatives, especially in terms of improving student outcomes?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So it depends. It depends on what it is that we are looking at, right? So if we're thinking about, questions that are focused in the academic, academic affairs realm, and we're thinking about things like retention numbers, or we're thinking about, graduation success rates. If we're thinking about on a student affairs level, we're thinking about things like the overall student experience. There are multiple ways to think about the student experience from the time of application all the way through to the time of graduation. And so some of the things that my office does is that we want to know about both the student experience and then also the sort of the broader student experience, feeling that sense of connection, feeling that sense of belonging, knowing where to go for mentorship and having extra layers of mentorship both within and outside of the department, but then also the academic success. How is a student feeling supported throughout their time here at Princeton, making sure that they're hitting some of those the major milestones, like passing the general exams, passing one's prospectus, getting ready for the dissertation. So we incorporate various metrics to analyze that, whether that be through student climate surveys to understand the student experience, or whether that be through small focus groups to understand how students are responding to the particular climate, to their environment. And we also engage faculty around questions around mentorship, and we engage students around questions around mentorship too, because we want to also, as we're supporting students on the road to success, we also want to support faculty around being the great mentors that students need. And then we also look at quantitative data as well. So we look at data in terms of our data from recruitment, and where are we meeting students? What are some of the most effective ways that we're getting students from the recruitment conference to the application, to the admit list, to the actual program, right? And so we're looking at those numbers. We're looking at numbers around enrollment. We're looking at, the numbers of students that are actually coming to our programs and taking advantage of the programs, both within, more specifically, the ADI team, but also more broadly in the graduate school, because that gives us a sense of how, the actual quantitative numbers of how students are engaged. So there are multiple sort of metrics we use to get a sense of the student success, both in terms of the actual just overall experience of being in grad school, and the sort of quantitative, sort of how many students are making sure are hitting those benchmarks, are successfully matriculating through their programs.
Mr. Ivy, can I ask you to answer the same question? How do you go about assessing your success?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to narrow the scope of my reply to just pipeline programs that I'm working with to get into grad school. I think Dr. Lewis did a great job of talking about all the metrics we use to retain people and matriculate them through the process for like the PhD overall. But I'll talk about the SR-EIP internship. The undergraduate internship program is measured in outcomes. Because it's grant funded, we do an individualized basis and keep up with everybody on an individual basis for years at a time. So we are talking to you about where you're going for grad school. We're talking to you about where you're going for your first job, how that interview went. So we're really measuring in terms of if students from our prep post-bac program, as well as our internship programs, are going on to get that PhD or MD. And we're proud to say over 80% of the people who go through our programs do go on to receive those degrees. So that's really the most relevant tracking outcome for us in terms of these pipeline programs. And for many of the different students, I'd say, that are in the Leadership Alliance programs, the SR-EIP this summer, those coordinators who are in those summer programs are probably thinking along the same lines as well.
In the time we have left, I'm wondering if each of the four of you can can just offer one thought that we haven't really touched on just yet. And I'll start just so that I'm not throwing this crazy challenge out. So one is just when you're reaching out to administrators, know that they start off with the presumption of being in your corner. They want you to succeed. And then the other piece about you being in touch with them, if an administrator doesn't, say a dean or something, doesn't get to work with students on a regular basis, simply coming in and telling them about what you're doing, telling them about what you're interested in studying, telling them about an experiment you're working on, telling them about your dissertation and how it's shaping up, that's a huge reward for those administrators. We get to know you, and when we see you succeed, then we feel good, we feel happy. So don't be afraid to reach out simply for the purpose of saying, I just want to get to know you and what your office does, and how we might interact, and tell you a little bit about what I'm interested in doing in my time here. Full-time administrators are going to be really interested in having that conversation. One, they'll feel better that they know that you know how they can help, and two, it makes their work real. I mean, we work real hard, but when we don't interact with students doing their research, it's just kind of, we're working off, and where the real important stuff for the university happens is kind of off in the ether. So simply by getting to know you and what you're interested in, we get to be connected with that, and that's a real value to us. I think going go as you are inspired.
I can go. Yeah, that's the order. Oh, I'm sorry, Candace, were you?
No, go ahead. I'll go next.
Okay. Yeah, so I think don't wait until you think you're in trouble to reach out. I mean, because that's like often that's what happens. Like a student becomes desperate because all of a sudden, I don't know, they got a bad grade, or in some cases, I mean, this is pretty dire, but where a student is being counseled out of the program and is being told that if they don't meet certain requirements, expectations by the end of the semester, that they'll be dismissed. And then at that point, there really isn't much that we can do to support you. But I think that's the importance of getting to know and identifying a network really before you arrive on campus, and then more as soon as you get on campus. When there are programs, especially like orientation and welcome programs for you, I would encourage you to attend those, because by the next week, you're just not going to have time to do it. And so do it while you have the time, so that you can at least identify one or two people that you can go to when you have a question. Because again, most of us we will not have the answers to all your questions, but more than likely we will be able to direct you to someone who can answer those questions. Yeah, we'll be able to do that. And there's something else I wanted to say about that. So also don't, like, given all that we've said about how our institutions are structured, there's a dean of students, there's a dean, there's a director of graduate studies, whatever, you're not going to remember all of that. So I would say, again, going back to this idea of identifying your network and going to those people, because like, even if I'm the associate dean for diversity and professional development, if you have a question about academic degree requirements or probation, like, I'm not the person, but again, if you come to me, I will tell you who the person is and I can advocate for you. So that would be my largest piece of advice. So thanks, Candace.
That's great advice. I think it's often true for graduate students to become very, very focused on their research groups and their advisor as their main place of support. And I think that it's really important to remember that you are still a student at a larger institute. You're a person who has a variety of needs, and there will be a lot of things that your advisor can't help you with, or shouldn't necessarily be the person you go to for help with. So thinking really early on about who your network is going to be. The one thing that you can take away from this is knowing that there are people at different levels of the institute and in different parts of the, and I say institute, I'm sorry, that's how we talk about Caltech, but university, college, who are there to help you. So thinking about, whether it's your own board of directors of mentors that you will connect with regularly, so that your whole world doesn't become dependent on this research group that you're in. And that would be my advice.
I'll take the next slide here. I think that I'll keep it short and sweet, that a handwritten thank you note will open doors for you that you didn't even know were there. And even more so if you deliver it in person. That person you write it for and deliver it to will remember your name and think about you in a very positive manner. It's made the world of difference for me professionally, both sending and receiving. So I think little gestures like that can go a long way to help forming that network of people.
I second all of this great advice. I would say be intentional about building relationships. And as you build relationships, get an understanding of how that relationship, as that relationship develops, whether that be in the department or whether that be in the larger sort of in the graduate school, get a sense of what you need and what works best for you, because then that allows for you to the network that's in your orbit. You can advocate for yourself. You can also maybe not know who to go to, but then know who to go to, because that person will direct you or place you in the right direction. And it's always good to follow up and to show your appreciation, because as you work throughout graduate school, you're going to just like an undergrad, build relationships that last a lifetime, that help build your professional and academic careers.
We are right at 2 o'clock, at least Eastern time. So I want to thank you all for making the time to do this. It's not something that most prospective graduate students end up doing, and it pays dividends, pays big ones. I certainly would have, like I said at the beginning, benefited from learning some of this information before I started graduate school. So give yourselves a pat on the back for making time for this. And I really want to thank the panelists here for sharing their hard-earned wisdom with you. These are valuable lessons, and they come with difficulty and come with a lot of hard work to realize how these things function. So I really appreciate my fellow panelists for sharing all of that information. Thank you so much.